President Ramaphosa dismissed Trump's threats, and earlier I had a conversation with the chief economist at Efficient Group, Dawie Roodt, on the implications of this growing diplomatic rift. And I started by asking him how seriously Trump's threat should be taken and whether he can actually stop South Africa from attending the G20 summit.
I don't think Trump can ban South Africa from a G20 as such. But he can certainly make it difficult for South Africans to go to the United States. He can simply refuse to issue them with visas, as an example. And just by the way, in a way, South Africa did exactly the same this year by whispering in the ears of Putin that he shouldn't be coming to South Africa because he could be arrested. So in a way, South Africa prevented Putin from coming to South Africa. I'm sure he wanted to come, but we all know that there's a warrant for him and that South Africa would be forced to arrest him if he comes to South Africa. So in a way, that's the same. But Donald Trump, I guess, can simply refuse to issue a visa to South Africans. And then by doing that, South Africans won't be able to attend the G20 meeting.
Certainly looking forward to see what happens. But of course, you said South Africa is taking it somewhat seriously, but we did see President Ramaphosa seemingly brushing it off and dismissing that threat earlier this week. He came out and gave a statement to the nation. And we also saw him sort of reaffirming South Africa's status as a founding member of the group, as one of the huge reasons that the U.S. cannot carry through with the threat. What is your take on how seriously South Africa has to take this threat? How seriously is it taking this threat? And is it clear what its official stance is?
Well, the official stance certainly is that South Africa is part of the G20 and that we are not planning to leave the G20, and there's no way anybody can kick us off the G20, and I agree with that. Attending the G20, that's a completely different matter altogether. But we must remember we're talking about what's going to happen in 1 year's time, and 1 year is a very, very long time in politics. In fact, I don't think the South African government is losing much sleep about this at the moment, simply because it's so far away in the future. 1 year is actually a long term.
Well, we also saw Trump, in addition to the G20 ban, he said his administration was going to stop all payments and subsidies to South Africa as well. Given that, of course, we can't forget the U.S. is South Africa's second largest single country trading partner after China. What implications does this statement have for South Africa's economy and also its trade and cooperation with the U.S. going forward, within this year at least?
Yeah, I think there are two questions there. The one is to do with subsidies, or it's simply payments, grants to South Africa. And as far as I know, there are no more grants coming from the United States to South Africa. We survived that, South Africa. So if there are any other subsidies that I'm not aware of, and if that's being stopped, it's not going to have much of an impact on South Africa. Trade, of course, is something completely different. And it will, and it already has had a significant impact on trade with the United States and on economic growth in South Africa. Depending, of course, how far it goes, that will determine what the impact on the South African economy will be. And my calculation, the worst case scenario is probably 0.2% lower economic growth or so. And it also depends on what sector you're talking about. And even if there's complete sanctions or trade sanctions against South Africa, the United States will still trade in certain things. South Africa exports certain minerals and metals and stuff to the United States. And those things, for example, we don't pay tariffs on those, as an example. But certain other industries, like the motor car industry and the agricultural industry, will certainly be affected, yes, without a doubt.
Now, you also mentioned how other G20 countries have responded to this. What are the implications of these recent events on both the U.S. and South Africa's relations with other G20 members? Also, what is your take on their response to this? Has South Africa had a strong enough support from other G20 members?
That's actually quite a fun question, and I think that's the issue here about G20. Remember that the G20 is primarily a political platform. We have to understand this. And we also have to understand that just about all countries in the world has got a score to settle with Donald Trump. Even the traditional allies of the United States, like Europe, for example, there are tariffs against the Europeans as well. Trump is threatening NATO. Trump is pressurizing the Europeans to spend more on defense and things like that. So they also have an axe to grind when it comes to Donald Trump. And by not attending the G20 in South Africa, he created this amazing opportunity for the rest of the world to come together and to create this illusion of solidarity between the various countries in the world. That's certainly not the case. If Donald Trump was here, we would have had a completely different outcome on the G20. But this was actually used by just about all the members of the G20, or nearly all of the members of the G20, to actually settle a score with Donald Trump. And he, in a way, offered this opportunity to our president, Cyril Ramaphosa. And Cyril Ramaphosa also used this opportunity to create the illusion of unity amongst the rest of the members of the G20.